Thank you so much, Program Director, for the kind introduction. Honorable Mayor, the Honorable Pravin Gordon said, good leaders listen. I would like to be a good leader, so I listened, and allow me to just offer a collective recognition of the important people that are in this room by just say, all protocol observed. And please, could you just note, Honorable Mayor, that I haven't had wine yet, so I haven't said all pretty girls observed. But I don't promise that it will be like that throughout the day, so please, one of the reasons we voted for you is to watch your residents and make sure that they're behaving all the time, so watch me. Okay, I would like to use some slides to just help me walk through what I would like to share with the group, but most importantly, to basically just divert their attention from me, because I'm kind of like a shy guy. So I hope that technology will work with me. I would like to really thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to address this special summit. I also would like to congratulate you, Mayor and the City of Tshwane, for convening the capital cities from Africa to discuss ways of making our cities sustainable and resilient. On behalf of C40, I also would like to thank you, Mayor, for the leadership that you are providing on sustainability, including the global leadership role that you have successfully played within the C40 by leading the global transit-oriented development network of cities at the global level. So we appreciate that very much. For those of you that are not familiar with C40, it is a global grouping of mayors of mega cities around the world, making a bold commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate risks. At present, the group is chaired by Mayor Anne Hidalgo of Paris. This morning, I would like to use the experience of C40 and try to frame why we need sustainable megacities or sustainable cities, sustainable capital cities to achieve managed development. And for me, when talking about managed development in Africa, I join the speakers before me and prefer to start with Agenda 2063. That was adopted by the head of states and governments of the African Union. As has been already said, it outlines strategies for achieving the Africa we want to see. And at the last AfriCities Summit that was convened right here in South Africa, local authorities, including some of the cities in here, embraced the Agenda 2063 as something that we are going to collectively contribute to. It is a bold agenda about the Africa Africans want to see, and we work collaboratively with the international community to actually achieve. It is not about the Africa that others want to see or others have defined for us. Excuse my African arrogance here. But it is an agenda that we shaped ourselves, recognizing that the narrative of Africa, I always say this without apologies, the narrative of Africa is changing. It's no longer that continent that is characterized by only civil wars, people fighting each other all the time. Or when we are not fighting, then we're busy dying with all sorts of deaths, or all sorts of diseases, sorry, excuse me. It's an Africa that is on the move. Of course, we do have pockets of those conflicts. We do have, of course, diseases, but also we need to look at the narrative is showing us that 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies are here in this region, and it's the fastest region in terms of urbanization. So according to the Agenda 2063, recognizing this kind of Africa that we are talking about, we would like to seek and achieve a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth, it has been mentioned, and sustainable development, and with climate-resilient economies and communities. For us in Africa, managed development is inclusive, sustainable, and climate resilient. And why the agency? Why the agency of really wanting to transition to sustainable cities for us to achieve this? Ladies and gentlemen, the noble idea of having managed development in Africa, or having the Africa we want to see, is facing huge threats from climate change. The next 3 to 4 years would decide if the world can avoid the worst climate change. And this was communicated loud and clear during the climate change COP21. Unless the world engages in mitigating and adaptation, and of course put in place appropriate finance mechanisms, climate disasters will put 1.3 billion people at risk by 2050 and cost $158 trillion, American dollars, double the global annual GDP. And the agency is there too because cities will bear the brunt of these costs by accommodating and accounting for hundreds of millions of displaced climate refugees while dealing with urban water shortages, as my colleague has just mentioned. Cities will deal with collapsing food systems, somebody has mentioned that, flooding, extreme heat, and all these things have been mentioned. They're already manifesting. And all these will put the health and well-being of urban residents in jeopardy while straining urban or social services. And mayors know what happens when social services are compromised. As we speak today, more than 70% of cities already feel the negative impacts of climate change. And these impacts, let me just make it clear here, these impacts are not respecting or seeing political party differences. Neither are they seeing international boundaries. So when we look at this challenge, let's know that when the floods come, it's not like party A will float and then the other party will be drowning. We will be actually drowning together. So we need to just bury these differences, break down the boundaries at some point, and confront this common threat. And our best hope in achieving managing development and the Agenda 2063 is in the global delivery of COP21 Paris Agreement, calling on us to mitigate, adapt, and put financing mechanisms in place. So, why the transition to sustainable cities? Yes, national governments have adopted the Paris Agreement, but they face increasing challenges in achieving it. National governments cannot deliver the Paris Agreement alone. We require a transition to sustainable and resilient cities, including the capital cities gathered here. At the C40 Mayors Summit in December 2016, C40 launched the city response to the Paris Agreement called the Deadline 2020, which is the world's first roadmap that cities should follow to achieve the Paris Agreement. And based on that Deadline 2020 initiative, I would like to just share a few, maybe 2 or 3, but why we believe that capital cities are a panacea for managed development, managed, sustainable, and resilient development in Africa. First, the transition to sustainable megacities is important because the contribution and impact cities are making in addressing, because of the contribution and impact that cities are making in addressing climate change. Cities are responsible for 70% of global emissions, meaning that they are the best actors, best positioned to reduce them. Cities represent 66% of energy consumption in the world, and energy contributes a lot to the emissions. And when considering the impacts of climate change, know that 50% of the world's population lives in cities, and this is expected to increase to 70% by 2050. And cities contribute about 85% of the GDP. With these realities, however, 98% of C40 cities are vulnerable to climate change, meaning that populations are threatened and the GDP, national GDP, is threatened. So climate disasters in cities will collapse economies, ladies and gentlemen, and will therefore leave more casualties in cities in the years to come. Our studies show that 1/3 of the projected emissions reduction under the Paris Agreement will be determined by solutions and decisions made in cities, making mayors in office today, those of you that are here right now, pivotal actors in delivering a global solution. Research published by COP21, research published during the COP21 by C40 and Arab identified 27,000 specific activities, programs, procurements, and policies that mayors and civic leaders have the power to deliver before 2020. And of these, C40 identified 2,300 high-impact, readily deliverable actions that could save 450 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2020. And this is equivalent to the annual emissions of the United Kingdom at the moment, which is the world's 5th biggest economy. That can be achieved just from cities. And together with that, or together with what has already been achieved, C40 cities alone could deliver over 1 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions or reduction by 2020. Second point I would like to make. Mayors are increasingly showing bold commitment. Kobe has talked about the Ekululeni Declaration, but in 2015, more than 440 mayors took part in the Climate Summit for local leaders during the COP21 in Paris and made a bold statement advocating for climate change. That's the leadership mayors are providing in this world. Fast forward that. 2017, when climate leadership deficit has emerged in the United States of America, who has stood in the gap? Mayors. So mayors are providing leadership. Mayors have made a bold public commitment to actually change the destiny or the course or the pathway in terms of sustainability. Through the Global Covenant of Mayors, formerly known as the Compact of Mayors, mayors are actually coming together to actually say, we are going to take action and we are going to measure the impacts. And if there are some mayors here that have not yet joined those mayors in the Global Covenant of Mayors, please see me or my colleague from ICLA, Kobe, to join this movement of mayors. The third and last point is that sustainable cities, or maybe let me just make this point clear, that sustainable cities work in collaboration. So this platform we have here is very important. Because mayors actually, once they take the commitment to work together, they actually plan and deliver action. And our report has shown that collaboration between cities is effective in catalyzing sustainable action. So as African capital cities, we need to take advantage of this. As a matter of fact, about 70% of the sustainability actions by C40 cities are now being delivered through city-to-city collaboration. This summit is a wonderful platform to actually catalyze that. Every 2 years, C40 actually track the actions that its cities are taking, and the trend has been increasing, moving from some 9,000 actions in 2011 to now over 11,000 actions as we speak. So mayors are increasingly taking action, and because of that, they have to be on the forefront of achieving managed development in Africa. The report also indicates that megacities are putting their money where their mouth is. megacities are investing in sustainability actions, indicating that 64% of the actions that we tracked in C40 are actually financed by cities' own budgets, besides the money that we would like to mobilize. And cities are increasingly finding innovative financing mechanisms to actually address climate change. In closing, sustainable megacities measure and report the impact. It's not just talk. They actually hold themselves accountable. And because to be able to demonstrate what I have just said, we need to have availability of data. This is why C40 and ICLA have been working with African cities to collect and analyze sustainability data using internationally recognized standards, such as the Global Protocol on community-scale greenhouse gas emissions, to make sure that we have credible data. We have also been encouraging megacities and capital cities to actually report through international platforms like CDP or like Carbon Registry. If your city is not doing that, please see me and my colleague Kobe to actually walk that path. I would like to conclude by saying that this gathering should give us, as sustainable cities, the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to sustainability and join the mayors in the United States by saying that we will continue to transition to a sustainable and resilient pathway agreed on at the COP21 in Paris. And we will focus on limiting the temperature increases to 1.5 degrees. We will focus on increasing the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change and foster climate resilience. And we'll focus on making finance flows consistent with pathways towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. When we do this, we will, among other things, improve health. We will have green infrastructure, which is cheaper. We will actually use clean energy, and we will increase property value. And as the president of France, the new president of France, where the agreement was signed, said to President Donald Trump, we will make the planet great again. I thank you for your attention.